Labor is in front by the slimmest of whiskers, 35.9%, down 2 points.
This is last night,
National
yeah.
nipping at their heels,
That's it. Call it.
35.3%,
No election.
down 1.3. The Miners aren't moving, ACT 10.8 up a smidge. The Greens holding on 8.1 despite all of their dramas. But the Minnows, Te Pati Maori, they pulled off a coup and gained support to 3.5%, up 1.7. New Zealand First back in the game, 3%, up 0.8. Both those parties nudging ever closer to that 5% threshold need.
Which is irrelevant. Māori Party don't need 5%, but good on you.
To get into Parliament. The Chris contest has a clear winner. The preferred Prime Minister rank.
This is really bad news for Christopher Luxon. Now, I'm not saying that to say that they won't get there, but this is really bad news for Christopher Luxon. Listen to what is said about Judith Collins' poll ratings.
Rankings show the public warming to Chris Hipkins. He's up on 23.4%, up 3.8 points, while his challenger, Christopher Luxon, drops to 16.4, down 2.4, his lowest score yet, lower than Judith Collins' last pre-election poll. 8.5% are keen on an Ardern return, while 7.5% want David Seymour. 3.6% are still wishing for Winston, and 2.3% want Green MP Chloe Swarbrick, while her leaders again didn't rate.
So here's another little thing that I looked up while I was talking about this, and it's this, yeah. So if you look at the left, what the percentages would be if people wanted a left-wing prime minister. So Chippy, Ardern and Swarbrick makes up about 34.2%. Luxon, Seymour and Peters makes up about 27.5%. So it's still pretty close. In fact, I mean, I got to say, being really, really honest, I wouldn't be that stoked if I was Chippy sitting on 23% either. I mean, that's only 1 in 4. You know, I don't think that's a particularly good number for a preferred prime minister, but it's certainly, even though it's only 7 points difference, you know, for Christopher Luxon to now be racing under what Judith Collins was, that is a concern. But do you know what, Chewy? It's not the biggest concern. The biggest concern is still Luxon's likability and how the public think he's performing.
Are you the right person to lead the National Party?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
Have you considered standing down to make way for someone else?
Never, no.
Never.
It's now an all-out
He's going to be there for 20 years.
October 14, everyone on the same page there.
There's no doubt it's a tight election race ahead.
There's no doubt about it. It's going to be a really close election.
Every single vote will count.
So, let the mudslinging begin.
Do you want a coalition of chaos or do you want strong, stable government?
Any national government is likely to be part of
Strong
a
and
coalition of
stable.
cuts.
We also asked, do you think the leaders are in touch or out of touch with the issues facing?
What do you think? This is not a good look. I don't want to spoil it, but for Luxon. So are they out of touch or not? Here we go.
New Zealanders, about 50% said Chris Hipkins was in touch
Not
with
bad.
their issues, while
Sausage
35.6% said he was out of touch. Christopher Luxon, the opposite tale. Only 37.2% thought he was in touch with issues facing Kiwis.
That's shocking
while
for a
nearly
millionaire
half,
with 7 houses.
47% thought he was out of touch.
I'd just say to you, I don't think I am. I think for me, I'm really...
You don't get to decide!
Falling in popularity and relatability, Luxon is also cut off a bridge to the beehive.
I've ruled out National coming to any arrangement with Te Pati Maori.
Te Pati Maori are still revelling in their political revolution, swiping Meka Whaitiri from Labour. They're Chris maker in this poll.
It doesn't really matter what the two Chris's say because their end games are vastly different to ours.
Do you regret ruling out Te Pati Maori?
Not at all, not at all, not at all.
Careful who you make an enemy of when friends are the path to power.
Do you think they're saying it 3 times might be a bit of a tell? No, I haven't got aces. No, of course I haven't got aces. I tell you what though, and I asked this last week and I'll ask it again. If you are a supporter of the National Party, are you happy that he ruled out working with Te Pati Maori? If it meant that you had to sit across the bench, across the house in opposition for another 3 years, would you be happy with that? Because Christopher Luxon might be happy with it, but I wonder if the people who want desperately to see National leading a government and to see Labour gone, I wonder if they're happy with it. I don't think that maybe they'd be as convinced.
Like, okay, do you think, like, I know I have my thought that someone may still try and roll Chris Luxon in the coming months. I'm going to stick with that. But here's the other question. If he does survive to the election and loses the election, do you think he'll survive that?
No,
because we've had this whole conversation of whether he's in this for the long haul.
No, I don't think he's in it for.
No,
I don't think he's in it. No, I don't think he's in it for the long haul. I think if he's not prime minister, he'll go. Because why would you? I mean, why would he hang around? just to sit across the benches. Like he's ineffective. And I think, now I forget the name of which reporter it was or interviewer it was, someone pointed out to him, I think it was the Sunday morning show on TV3, that he was talking about, you know, being likable and New Zealanders knowing him. And he's like, this is my job to do from here on in. And the host was like, you've had a year. Like, you've had a year.
Who are you?
You haven't done it in a year. What are you going to do in the next 6 months? Another part of this research, and we're going to have a look at two parts. One is from the news last night. One is from the AM show this morning, is talking about, I've written down here out of touch numbers. I'm not sure what that means. Out of touch numbers? I can't remember it. Let's have a look. It's only for 20 seconds. Let's have a look.
Luxon's personality problems have bedded in. It's beginning to feel like the public just isn't that into him. These new out-of-touch numbers are brutal. That is about relatability. And digging in deeper, even 20% of national voters think he's out of touch. 1 in 5 of his own voters. Whereas for Hipkins, it's only 1 in 10 Labour voters that think he's out of touch.
So there you go. So that's the story from last night. We do get to move on and have a look at, they then talked about this in a bit more in detail this morning on, oh gosh, you know, we've still got things to do, haven't we? We haven't actually talked about we haven't talked about the receipts thing yet. We can get to that in a second. Well, let's just cruise into the conversation this morning about, do we need to do that? I think maybe we won't. Oh, we'll do it. We'll push play to start with. They were talking this morning more about how he's performing, how Luxon's performing, and it's, again, not a good look for them.
A little bit surprising that Labour didn't drop more in this poll. They have had a couple of weeks, in fact, a couple of months from hell. Stuart Nash.
Why do you think that's surprising, though? Like, I would question that. Why is it surprising? Because other people on the other side of this conversation might say that, yes, there were some hiccups, but they handled it quite well. I mean, like, they might. But someone who is, what do we say, the media voice for ACT, says, we were all expecting them to drop, and they haven't really. What's that all about? You know? Yeah. So
Meka Whaitiri, all of those scandals, it just feels like
all of those
Chris
scandals,
Hipkins has been in this constant fire hose trying to get everything back under control. It has been chaotic. And really surprising that National didn't gain from that, I think. So, yes, right now we're looking
surprised.
No, so let's ask that question, right? So this is the thing that no one ever pushes it back. Is it surprising, or is it that no one's buying what National's selling? Like, if it's surprising to you, maybe you're not a good political analyst. Like, I'm not talking about gender in particular, but if it's surprising, does that mean you don't understand the voter? Because if it's surprising, it either is surprising or it is that the New Zealand public aren't buying what they're selling, even if Labour's as bad as these guys are professing. If that's not enough to get National over the line, then maybe National's worse. Maybe that's the logical conclusion here, Chewy.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
But that question's never asked, or that thought is never put out there, obviously. It's just like, gosh, we just don't really get it. We don't really get why they're not doing better.
At the miners, we're looking at who can cobble together a coalition, whether that's going to be the so-called coalition of chaos that National is calling the left, or whether that is going to be the now so-called coalition of cuts that Labour is pitching National as.
Oh, for God's sake.
How are our leaders looking? Because you've got some exclusive results for us here at AM to see how well Chris Hipkins and Christopher Luxon.
So we'll look at the performance and then we'll move on.
That's right. So we asked how each of the leaders was performing. What we do is we ask on a scale, we ask whether they've been performing well or performing poorly. Chris Hipkins performing well, 55.6% of people think he's doing well, while only 18.2% of people think.
That's brutal. That's brutal. Now, just remember, like, you can't have two narratives here. You can't have Labour are terrible, but we don't really understand why National's not getting more foreground. Those things are incongruent. Either Labour's terrible, which means National's even worse, or Labour's not too bad and National's not as good. They're the only two logical conclusions here. Both of them put the public saying that Christopher Luxon and National aren't as acceptable, likeable, aren't performing as well, aren't wanted in there as much as Labour. So either Labour are terrible and National are the worst in the world, or Labour's okay and National's pretty bad. They're the only two logical, because you don't go, Labour's terrible and National's much, much better than them, but it doesn't show up in the numbers. That's not an option you've got. People trying to make commentary on this, Chewy.
I think also one thing to say with we probably say this a little bit with every poll result, people like us love polls. People like Jenna Lynch love polls. It gives us a little bit of blood in the water. But there is always a third of the voting base is never going to vote anyone but blue.
Yep.
A third of the voting base is never going to vote anyone but red. And then there's the third in the middle that is going to swing one way or the other depending on which way the wind's blowing. We can talk about these very small changes, and it doesn't change anything until election day. But when we start talking about questions like, do you find this person likable, trustworthy, and good at their job? That is a different vibe. And I think the most consistent thing is that Christopher Luxon's results have been steadily declining. They have never gone up. It's just down, 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 down.
Now, that doesn't mean that they're not going to win. That means he's not going to be the next prime minister. But it does mean if the message we're getting, and I'm not actually saying this is the message, but I'm just being logic boy here. If the message we're getting is Labour is terrible and they need to go, then why is national polling so much worse? Two conclusions. Either National Labour isn't that bad, they're doing all right, or National is the worst party there's ever been in politics because they're worse than this terrible other party who happens to be in government right now. They're your only two options.
You know what would be a good way to counter just being pretty unlikable in general? Is if you're consistently coming up with policy and absolutely smashing it out of the park.
Yeah.
You can be unlikable and still have people going, well, I hate your guts, but you've got a point there. That's a really good policy.
Yeah.
And they haven't bought good policy. They've bought shitty ideas from the past and even worse slogans from overseas. Yeah, Chris Luxon has been hammering those phrases, coincidentally, since he's come back from the UK, since talking with Michael Gove of all people. Coalition of Chaos, we highlighted the fact that is something that the Tories used over in the UK. And strong and stable, a fantastically ironic phrase that the Tories used as well. So, we know who he's had a chat with while he's been over there.